My grandfather built a company worth $300 million. My cousin Richard spent 20 years making sure everyone knew he would inherit it. I spent 20 years making sure Richard was wrong. Our family had a name in this state, not the kind of name you earn, the kind you were born carrying whether you want it or not. My grandfather had built the company from one warehouse and 40 years of decisions that nobody in our generation would have had the stomach to make. He was not sentimental, he was not warm, he was precise. He saw everything and said very little. Richard understood none of that. Richard understood appearances. He showed up to every family event in the right clothes, saying the right things to the right people. He sat next to my grandfather at every dinner. He laughed at every story, even the ones he had heard 30 times. He called it positioning. He said this out loud to me once at a cousin's wedding with a drink in his hand and complete confidence that I was not a threat worth being careful around. He was not entirely wrong at the time. I was 22 and I was quiet, and I had just started law school on a partial scholarship, while Richard was being handed a VP title at the company he had never once done unglamorous work inside. I watched Richard operate for 12 years. I watched him move money in ways that were legal but not right. I watched him build alliances with board members whose loyalty was to comfort, not to the company. I watched him slowly position himself as the only logical heir by eliminating every other option. My father was pushed out at 51, a restructure, handled delicately. My aunt was bought out with a number that felt generous until you understood what her shares would be worth in 7 years. Richard smiled at both funerals of those decisions. He called it evolution. I called my grandfather from a payphone in 2019 because I did not want the call on any record. My grandfather picked up on the second ring. I told him what I had been watching for 12 years. I told him the specific transactions. I told him the specific board members. I told him the specific mechanism Richard planned to use to consolidate voting shares after the estate transfer. I had documented everything in a format a forensic accountant could follow. My grandfather was quiet for a long time. Then he said, "How long have you been watching?" I said, 12 years. He said, "Good." He said nothing else and hung up. 3 months later, my grandfather called a full family meeting. Richard arrived in a new car. He had already told his wife the company was coming. He sat at the table with the specific posture of someone who has already won. My grandfather's attorney read a document that took 40 minutes. The company was not going to Richard. It was not going to any single person. It was going into a family trust with a board of independent directors and one managing trustee with veto authority over all major decisions. The managing trustee was not Richard. It was me. My grandfather had structured the entire thing 2 months after my phone call. Richard stood up. He said this was not what was discussed. My grandfather looked at him for the first time that afternoon and said, "Nothing was ever discussed. You assumed. The company has no room for people who assume." Richard contested the trust in court for 2 years. He lost. The legal precedent set by his failed challenge actually strengthened the trust structure in ways his own attorneys did not anticipate. He made my position more permanent by trying to remove it. He left the company 18 months after the ruling. The board voted unanimously on that decision. I did not vote. I did not need to. I run the company now. There is a portrait of my grandfather in the main conference room. He is not smiling in it. He never smiled in photographs, but whoever took that portrait caught something in his expression that I recognize. It is the look of someone who already knows how something ends while everyone else is still deciding how to begin.